Hello, one concurrent viewer. I think it's time to start talking about morality. I know I talk about this a lot, but it seems that for some people it's an amorphous subject that they still do not quite understand, even though they may be pastors, like Paul Van der Klee. So what happened earlier was that I was kind of invited to join the stream, and then when I managed to alight on a subject that was interesting, Jacob Faturecci swooped in and more or less demanded that I be put backstage because I was so evil and scary, and he kept going on and on and on about me and flashing those flag and gun photos of me. And really, really bigging me up into some sort of Marvel super villainess. I wonder which character I would be in Marvel Comics if I were one of them. Let's just have a look. What would I like to be? Marvel Comics villainesses. So I could be something called Mystique. Maybe I'm looking at the wrong thing. Oh, I could be somebody called Hella Raven Darkholme, aka Mystique, Mariah Dillard, aka Black Mariah, Mary Alice Walker, aka Typhoid Mary, Jean Grey, aka Dark Phoenix, Yuriko Uyama, aka Lady Deathstrike, Tilda Johnson, aka Nightshade, Amora, aka the Enchantress. Which would I like to be? I could be blue. I could be... Hella sounds mean. Alright, then that's quite a good illustration of somebody called Hella. I hope it's not actually pronounced Healer or something. But it was, in a way, bemusing to see them so apparently frightened of little old me. They must have heard me go on about secular Quranism 100,000 times, or Jacob would have. He could have explained it to them all by himself, saying it's just Sharia for non-Muslim Westerners. It's meant to be easy on the non-Muslim, and be that moral system that America so desperately needs. Why would anybody need a moral system? It's all rules, but then we need rules to remind us that we should not be killing each other, stealing from each other, committing sexual offences on each other. And really, the point that liberal sexual morality is very different to no-hide sexual morality should of course be discussed, but I never got that far. I was as pleasant as I could be, but Jacob Farturecci swooped in and demanded that I be put backstage while I had to endure them discussing me without the benefit of being able to answer, except in the chat, for about 3 hours. And then eventually I was allowed to explain myself about the flag and gun photos. And then when it got really interesting, it was time for them to close the stream. Interestingly, Paul van der Klee was there. He took an interest and came on at the end when I was finally allowed to speak for myself. What was notable about the guests is that they seemed to want a safe environment and seem to be saying, oh, but we need a nanny, we need somebody to make sure our feelings aren't hurt. And I thought, oh no, where's the fun of it? We should just keep talking and maybe even have a few arguments, which would make our conversation more authentic and emotional and dramatic and possibly entertaining. And these things are easily done in a stream. G Block does it wonderfully. And his guests are real people with bees in their bonnets and lifestyles to lead. And I find them very enjoyable because it is literally a slice of life. And basically, Verdi would let his guests talk like a gracious host. He wouldn't be corralling them into one room and lecturing at them. But this is what Jacob does. And very amusingly, his guests made their feelings about that known to him. But what Paul van der Klee said was, well, I don't know if he's doing it on purpose. So I said, nobody discusses morality in philosophy departments in academia. And he said, we discuss it all the time. Well, if you're discussing it all the time, it is not effective. So the kind of discussion I want about morality is whether we have a moral system, or what is a moral system, what is its nature and purpose? Do we have one that is working? If not, what should replace it? How do we know if our moral system is not working? And what is morality? What is morality is the most important thing of all. I mean, I would say the no-hide laws are the perfect expression of morality, in that they are crafted in a way that is intended to be uncontroversial and is contained in the Babylonian Talmud and said to be derived from the Torah about what laws Gentiles should be following. Obviously, not being God's chosen people, Gentiles would have a lower standard to observe. It is rather like you're a parent, your child has a bedtime, and you will have to impose a bedtime on your child. This means that your bedtime must logically and necessarily be later than that of your child, in the same way that Jews who in fact set and uphold standards will have to logically and necessarily have a higher moral standard to observe. So, well, Noahides only have 7 Noahide laws. Jews have 613 commandments, but not all of them can be, not all of them are possible to perform because the third temple is not built. Now, when I talk about morality like this, it's clear that I mean religion. And when I talk about religion, it becomes a political hot potato because religion and politics are a source of conflict because people don't agree with each other. How are we to deal with this problem? Obviously, we should basically corral people into agreeing to the Noahide laws because this is meant to be the universal and eternal universal moral minimum. And if this is agreed, we can then go about choosing the best available moral system. One of the things that Judaism is known for is a saying of before the disease, the cure exists. What does this mean? It means really that God, if he exists in his mercy, has provided us with a cure to the disease. So it could be said that God is conducting some kind of moral or social or political experiment on his creatures. He is probably testing our morality or ability to use our reason to solve problems and answer questions. And I'm saying that I have the answer to the problems of Western man, and for many years now I have been frustrated in my attempts to convey the solution to people in senior positions of government because they don't seem to want to listen. They seem to be saying, on the one hand, that there is a problem, but on the other hand, there isn't, leading me to conclude that they are frightened of rocking the boat, saying anything out of line in case they get cancelled. And the way the men in that stream reacted to me was as if any moment now I was going to explode some kind of verbal bomb that will end in a nuclear holocaust or something. So I don't quite see why my words are considered to be so dangerous, considering how little influence I have. But perhaps Jacob's exaggerated fear of me getting up to all sorts of I'm not reined in properly is telling. So what is he afraid of? He must consider why he behaves in such a hysterical way. I have said previously that he suffers from histrionic personality disorder, which neatly explains everything. But supposing he weren't mentally ill, though he does admit quite regularly that he's on medication and has been diagnosed with a mental illness. So what does Jacob fear about me, assuming he is mentally in good health? Why does he behave in that way? Why does he feel the need to demonize me and otherize me and repeatedly scroll those flag and gun photos of me up and down to almost say, don't listen to her, don't listen to her, don't listen to her. And it has had the opposite effect. It has made people think, well, who is this fascinating woman? We must hear something of her. We must hear her voice. And there were demands in the chat to let me speak. So I guess I must thank Jacob for his care and attention in ensuring that I have all this publicity that he so thoughtfully created for me. But let us consider why Jacob is so hysterical. Obviously, the members of his regular guests, or Gavin's regular guests, are obedient to Jacob's wishes. Apparently, he has some sort of StreamYard package where he allows his associates to use StreamYard so he can drop in on their stream and tell them what to do because he's, after all, paying for it. So if you want to influence, if you want to win friends and influence people, paying for their StreamYard account might be a good way of doing it. But Jacob is particularly what's the word I'm looking for? Well, he is triggered, isn't he? A lot of you are now used to me because, however horrible my idea seemed to you, the first time you heard it, after long immersion in secular Quranism, you could, well, you're acculturated to it. You become accustomed to it. It's like plunging into cold water or hot water, and after a while getting used to it. Well, those around you will be oohing and eyeing and saying how cold and hot it is, but you will have become accustomed to it. So what is the cause of Jacob's hysteria and making such a big fuss about me? I think he can't quite understand why I dare to do what I do. I think basically that is the problem. He doesn't really think I'm a Nazi. I don't think he does it. It's just, one of the things that he can use against me. And he must think that his Gentile associates need protecting from me. And obviously he sees me as a figure of a villainy. But what is the reason for him thinking that I am some kind of villainess? I don't mind admitting that I'm not always on best behavior. I do give people pieces of my mind about what I think is wrong with the West, and I just don't see why people react in that way when I really don't think I'm saying anything weird. People complain about their government all the time, and I don't think I'm saying anything out of the ordinary when I say that it seems that America is pushing the world into a third world war, and I don't see why people would object to me trying to stop the outbreak of the third world war. by explaining to Westerners what the problem might be. And I'm saying that if you don't have a functioning moral system, at least effective at maintaining minimum standards of sexual morality, ensuring that most parents in your society are married parents, you are going to suffer the problem of degeneracy. And I suppose the reason why people don't want to listen to me is because they don't want to give up fornication and gay sex. I mean, I think the presumption is that adultery is well, forbidden, but fornication became the thing as well as gay sex, and this has led to gender identity issues to the extent that it has caused a woman called Elizabeth Hale to go on a killing spree after having written her manifesto, and we don't know what her manifesto says, but she has a history of mental illness, and apparently, while she was living at home, she wanted to kill a certain person in the Covenant School who was counseling her. I think I've got that story right, but maybe I haven't, so you better check. Unfortunately, the position is that there have been no reports about the contents of the manifesto, so it looks like the media is hushing it up. And I guess they're going to play around with it before we're allowed to see it. She should have put it online. So obviously, Elizabeth Hale had a problem with the little girl whom she killed, whose father she was. Well, she had a problem with her father. Sorry, the little girl's father, whom she who was killed in the shooting spree. It has been reported as some kind of anti-Christian hate crime, and well, it proves to be interesting. It is already interesting about her motivations, and I suppose they're taking great care about how to release the information so that people who are interested will not get the wrong end of the stick or something. What I've heard recently is that the trans activists have been saying that. What have they been saying? They've been saying that that she is to be sympathised with, and we are to feel sympathy for her rather than the people that she murdered. And this is, of course, outrageous. And this brings us neatly to the question of what is moral. I mean, if you're going to kill people, who most deserve to be killed? And there seems to be some disagreement in America about that. So we know that Western civilization is in a polar state when men and women don't really know who they are or are afraid to declare themselves to be either male or female, and there's been a lot of male encroachment into female spaces because there has been a lot of female encroachment into male spaces. And how are we to resolve matters? I'm saying it can only be resolved by morality, by a system of morality. And by this I mean surely religion. We don't have any secular political ideology that has the confidence of people globally. If I were to write a bestseller of my ideal moral system, people would not really be taking me seriously, even if it were a bestseller, because probably they think that my book being a bestseller, was rigged somehow, or well, bestsellers are not necessarily moral guides to humanity. So if morality is rules about right and wrong, and a moral system is about different rule systems for different religions and secular political ideologies, then there must have been a purpose. All ideas have a purpose. And the purpose of morality is, I would suggest to you, to keep the group in existence and apart from others. That is to say, it is intended to keep the group producing the next generation within wedlock, discouraging divorce, encouraging good parenthood, encouraging stable marriages, which would which would require laws that would have the effect of making people more likely to stay in their marriages. So this is pretty fundamental, because obviously the whole purpose of marriage is legitimate children, and if people can't any longer talk about these things without getting angry and hysterical, then something is deeply wrong, and it's obvious that there's something deeply wrong now in the Western psyche. It was horrific to see Jacob being hysterical, and all the others falling into line. But then, well, it was pointed out by Gavin that Jacob pays for his stream. StreamYard has a package whereby you can allow your friends, your associates, to use it without limit. And I suppose that would be a good way of getting them in. You let them use StreamYard until they're completely hooked, and then when the freebie is withdrawn, you'll get a new StreamYard customer. But what I particularly wanted to say is intended to address what Paul van der Clay said in the chat. He was saying that because I wasn't showing my face, I wasn't allowed to speak on morality. I just don't see what the problem is, because I have shown my face from time to time. They don't. I mean, nobody pretends that I'm not really who I am. My voice, I think, is distinctive enough for people to recognize it, particularly for the Americans to recognize it. And I really don't see the problem. He's just making trouble, I suppose. He wants to undermine me and make it harder for me to talk to his fellow Americans, because I'd have to put if I were the vain sort of woman, I suppose I would put on makeup, and I suppose his intention is to put me through to put me to inconvenience and delay. I don't see why it would matter if I were why my identity would matter. I suppose they're going to be endlessly speculating on whether I'm Muslim or male or female, or pretty or ugly. But why would they need to see me? All they need to do, and it is actually better that they do it in this way, is to examine my ideas on their own merits. So if they want to imagine me in uh, in jail, perhaps, um, they should still listen to me because um, it's perfectly possible for people who have been put in jail to know the difference between right and wrong and have perfectly sound arguments and sound ideas. And my great beauty, if seen, would be distracting and not help me make my point. Actually, the most effective way for me to make my point would be to um, post tweets on the subject, which I will do very soon, because Paul van der Clay is on Twitter, and also to address all the questions in the chat that I didn't get round to dealing with. When they came up, there were quite a lot of interesting questions that I want to go back to, and I'm I guess I'm quite pleased about that. It was a longish stream. I stayed in the back. I stayed backstage the whole time. Well, I was on briefly, and then they put me backstage, thinking I would go away, and I refused to go. And I posted in the chat, and even in the private chat, and made my presence known because, well, it's part of my project to communicate with Americans who still identify as Christian, that Christianity, or Christo-liberalism, as I prefer to call it, is kaput. And it seems they're not familiar with the arguments. I know a lot of people who are probably now listening will be able to parrot my arguments in their sleep. So Paul van der Clay's objection to my not showing my face is irrational and irrelevant. I have not proposed anything immoral. I have said, if your religion is failing, then you need to look for another one, particularly if the religion that is failing is absurdity and idolatry and blasphemy. Then you definitely need to get a new one. And really, there shouldn't be so much hysteria and reluctance and squawking and baseless hatred, really. Like, people like Paul van der Clay should be happy that, well, that I care enough to, keep telling them, the Americans who are also worried about the state of their country, about what to do. And, what's the problem with actually considering whether I'm right or wrong? In a safe space, if that's what you need, to work out whether I'm a force for good or a force for evil. I'm just saying, you're going to be in trouble, Americans, if you just keep allowing your ruling classes to make up the rules as they go along, which is what we in Europe also suffer from. We have these people who have control of the legislature and control the laws, because under the doctrine of parliamentary supremacy, Parliament can pass or repeal any law. So how can we tell if these laws are good or evil? And I'm saying it's really easy. It's really easy. What you do is you rank the four Gentile religions according to their conformity with the 7 Noahide laws, producing a ranking of Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, and Christianity. And once you realize that Christianity is the bottom of the heap, then you know what to do. You have to, well, find a better religion. And the logical next step would be to find the most Noahide Gentile religion, and that would be Islam. you shouldn't have a problem with that unless you're an Islamophobe. If you're an Islamophobe, it means that you are suffering from an irrational hatred and fear of Muslims and Islam. Why do you hate and fear Islam? Because you don't want to admit that Christianity is kaput. Christianity is a religion of your ancestors, and you understandably find it traumatizing to acknowledge that Christianity is kaput. But really, when you think about it, it shouldn't be such a surprise. I mean, apart from the fact, okay, just supposing I haven't been saying this since 2009. When you think about it, and look back on Western history, you would have to acknowledge that the American, French, and Russian revolutions were rejections of Christianity and monarchy. I mean, it's so obvious, but it's like, it's a horrible analogy, but it is like eating your own vomit. I equate revolutions as a bout of food poisoning. If you think of your civilization as a person, I mean, I'm sure Americans have no problem imagining America as this character called Uncle Sam. Uncle Sam has a bout of food poisoning, and then France does, and then Russia does. I mean, what does it all mean? It means that the Americans, the French, and the Russians have had enough of monarchy, and obviously, to reject monarchy, you would have to reject Christianity. And you could even say that it is because Christianity failed to prevent the evils that caused the American, French, and Russian revolutions, it is kaput. And obviously, the monarch would have to take the blame. So when the Russians committed regicide and when the French did the same, they were really saying that no more kings, we've had enough. And Christianity failed to support the divine right of these kings to rule, and it was time to give it up. It should have been given up 100 years ago. I mean, how many more times are we going to? I mean, does it need to make the penny drop? So we mentioned these revolutions, the American, French, and Russian revolutions, and that there were all sorts of disruptions going on. The Napoleonic Wars, the Wars of the Reformation, the First World War, the Second World War, and it's time that Europeans and Americans understood their own history. What is the problem with not understanding your own history? It just means that you're condemned to repeat the painful mistakes again and again and again. And it's obvious that a lot of people in America and Europe have not quite learnt their lesson, because they're talking about Christian nationalism, which fortunately I am pleased to know Paul van der Klee disapproves of. He says it's all been done. The American empire was acquired by Christian nationalism, or if you prefer, Christian imperialism. So we already know that there have been 3 global empires: the Spanish, the British, and the American global empires, spreading idolatry and blasphemy and Christianity, and people have had enough of it, including Europeans and Americans. People don't really take to you stuffing the religion that you don't believe in onto other people, they will notice that something is not quite right. And this is fundamentally the problem, and I'm saying it can easily be corrected by secular Quranism. And even if you don't like it, you'll have to make yourself like it, because there is no other solution. There is no alternative.